It's an absolute pleasure to have Emeritus Professor Guy Claxton with us this evening, this morning for him. For those of you that don't know, Guy Claxton is the Emeritus Professor of Learning Sciences at the University of Winchester Centre for Real World Learning in the UK, and the author of The Future of Teaching and Intelligence in the Flesh: Why Your Mind Needs Your Body Much More Than It Thinks. Guy, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today. Claire, it's nice to see you as well. I'll pass over to you to maybe dig into a little bit more about Guy's book.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons we're chatting to Guy tonight is, well, first of all, because he's a friend of Aotearoa and a champion of our education system and what it could and should be. But also because we are taking this opportunity to discuss his new book that he has written with Emily Poel, Bodies of Learning: How Embodiment Science Transforms Education. Bodies of Learning by Claxton and Poel defines education using embodiment science, connecting mind and body as the body mind, drawing on embodied cognition research. It proposes a transformative, holistic vision for learning that integrates feeling, action, heart, gut, and brain, thereby reshaping intelligence and teaching. And this book challenges the prevailing focus on intellectual understanding, arguing that learning is deeply intuitive, emotional, and physical, and it provides practical strategies for classrooms to align with human nature and advocates for structural changes to reimagine schools as spaces for mastering thinking and real-world problem-solving, going beyond mere well-being. Body of Learning calls for a fundamental shift in teaching, recognizing intelligence as a dynamic blend of memory, bodily awareness, intuition, and emotion with actionable ideas. This essential reading is for all educators seeking a truly holistic and effective education system. So I can't think of a more timely topic for us to be discussing as we weather the storm of education reforms here in Aotearoa. So I'm going to hand back to Liam, who is going to begin our conversation with Professor Guy Claxton.
Cool, thanks, Claire. So we wanted to pick up on some of a four-part series of posts that Guy helped write for our Substack. And so, Guy, the first thing that we thought we would pick up on was how should we go about defining mind in the context of embodiment science? And what are the body, mind, and the 4 E's?
Right. This might be a longish answer to this question. You've packed in quite a lot there, Liam. If I'm going on for too long, if I need to pause for breath, just let me know. Or you think the listeners might be falling to sleep. So let me pile in to this. Perhaps the first thing I want to say preliminary is this book is a demonstration of one important strand of research and thinking about education from the learning sciences. I can't stress strongly enough that the learning sciences are a novel, hybrid, active, multifarious set of approaches to learning. Some of them involve education, some of them don't. But I feel strongly that teachers, for example, really need to know about the wealth and the breadth of what's going on in the science of learning, where in some quarters, and I gather in New Zealand at the moment, some people are offering a rather shrunken model of learning and trying to present it as if it were the only approach to learning that was validated by science. And this is not only completely misguided, but it's also can lead in education in directions where it really shouldn't be going if we're trying to help young people get ready to live intelligently and to live fulfilling lives in the 21st century. So this is part of a kind of larger enterprise, if you like, to say, hold on a minute, if you're going to be talking about the sciences of learning, the learning sciences, you need to know my stuff as much as you need to know John Sweller's stuff. And then you can make up your own mind about what the implications are that you're going to take into your school. So that's a little bit of the background. First bit of your question, Liam, was how do we define mind in the context of embodiment science? In the book, we say that mind is a tricky word because it has at least 4 different meanings. The first is that it means the mind is actually a verb, to mind. And what that means is to care. So the root of one of the major roots of our understanding of mind is that it's to do with what we care about, what matters. A child minder is not just someone who's aware of children, it's someone who is taking care of children. So we have to, right from the word go, we have to reinstall a kind of value base to our thinking about the nature of mind. It's not just a matter of cold cognition. It's a matter of it's a matter of what matters, what's mattering to us and what's mattering to the young people in our classrooms. So right there, you've got the body is involved because our body is the repository of all of what we've learned about things that are good for us, bad for us, pleasurable, toxic, successful and unsuccessful. And all of those experiences are sedimented down into a set of habits, which are often to do with hunching our shoulders up or tensing our lips to stop ourselves crying or feeling butterflies in the pit of our stomach and so on. So at the basis of our thinking about mind, you've got to include the body. So we'll get on to the body mind and why it's important to smash body and mind back together rather than treating them separately. So that's one view of mind. The second is a sort of general one, but it's an important one. It means roughly what we think is the organ of intelligence, what makes us smart in the world. That's what mind is. And part of what our work in the book is to say that there are many different ways of understanding what that organ of intelligence, what is it that underpins our ability to know, to learn, to function successfully in the world. The third meaning of mind is intellect. You say someone has a brilliant mind. You mean they're rational, they write good research papers, they're articulate, they're what have you. And the fourth is something to do with awareness or presence. Mind out means be aware of what's going on. And the problem is that these 4 definitions get kind of muddled up and treated in different kinds of ways. One way of summarizing the problem with education is that it seems to have worked itself in a space where they think the second and third things are the same. In other words, they equate the organ of intelligence with intellect, with rationality, with language, with reasoning, with explanation, with a kind of dispassionate attitude to knowledge as, propositional as facts and knowledge, rather than experiential knowledge, for example, of the world. And the other problem with education is that it rather neglects the first and the last meanings. It doesn't have much. It is like supposed to be presented as if it were a kind of disembodied enterprise, nothing to do with values. When people often talk about educational reform, they treat it as if it was just like a technical business. We've just got to tweak it a little bit, and our ATAR scores or I've recently been talking in Australian. Our ATAR scores or our whatever the New Zealand equivalent is, as if that was all we cared about, and what kids care about doesn't count as part of the problem. So already there you can see part of the scope or the journey or the project of the book is really, one way of saying it is really an inquiry into what is this organ of intelligence? Is it malleable? How much of it is dependent upon experience? And if so, what kind of experience do we offer kids in school which help them expand to make that organ of intelligence more effective, more powerful, more up to date, more able to detect fake news, more able to be sent to be in tune with what is deeply worthwhile to you rather than what is just superficially the latest fad for you, and so on. So that's in a way why our project is to try and put body and mind back together again. Because if you're going to equate, this has started with Plato. There's a long intellectual history here. Started with Plato, goes through Descartes, and ends up in the present day with this idea that mind is intellect, intellect is intelligence, intellect has nothing to do with the body, therefore the body is not intelligent. So the more of the body there is involved in something, the less intelligent it's going to be. So emotions have quite a lot to do with the body. So we treat emotions as if they were disruptive or a nuisance or an irrelevance in school. Anything that has whiffs of bodiness about it tends to get relegated. You only have to look at the hierarchy of esteem of subjects in the secondary school curriculum, with maths at the top, which apparently has almost no body about it. You can do it with a brain and a pencil and a piece of paper or a computer, whatever. And then down the bottom, what do we find down the bottom? Physical education, dance, drama, practical, vocational forms of education, sports. But sports and the arts are exempted if they win you trophies. Then they get some esteem, but not in their own, if they add to the silverware in the foyer, proudly displayed in the foyer of your school, then they have some esteem, but not otherwise. So, I think that'll do. The other things. Oh no, let me say a little bit about the 4E's. So the 4E's, 4E cognition, became for a while a sort of popular way of talking about what we're calling embodied cognition or embodiment science. And the 4E's are, I'll explain them briefly: inactive, embodied, embedded, and extended. So this is a kind of a summary of a view, you might call it quite broadly, a view of human nature, which has emerged from a lot of academic, a lot of scholarly work over the last 20 or 30 years. This goes back to about the 1990s, was the start of this work. And these 4E's more or less summarize the hub of what seems to be emerging from a realization that however intellectual your subject matter is, it also has something of the body about it. There's a lot. Read almost any erudite paper, and it will be full of metaphors which are based on personal experience and practical activities of the body. We may come back to that later if we have time to do so. So the first E is inactive, which basically says we're built for doing things. We're fundamentally designed by evolution to be good at doing things that matter to us. That's our fundamental, at the heart of the way we're designed as intelligent organisms, intelligent animals. And knowledge is ancillary to that. Knowledge is a way of helping us out of a tough spot if our habits and our visceral understandings, if our muscle memory isn't working. It's like, I think of knowledge as being like the larder of intelligence. It's full of kind of cans of knowledge which you can go to and open if you haven't got anything else in the fridge to make your evening meal with. So it's extremely useful. That intellectual side of things is very useful, but from an embodiment science point of view, it's useful when it helps us act better, when it helps us function better in the world, and not just when we're doing exams or when we're at posh dinner parties or when we're on quiz shows. Those are three occasions in which being knowledgeable in and of itself can be useful. But there's an awful lot of the other aspects of life, the rest of life, where it's much more questionable. Whether, if you're trying to save your marriage, how your first-class degree from the University of Auckland may not be the most powerful that you have. Something to do with imagination or empathy or humility or patience or the willing to experiment with different ways of being would be much more likely candidates if we're trying to save a relationship than sitting down with a piece of paper and writing down the pros and cons and trying to decide who is more right and who is more wrong in the relationship doesn't get you very far. So an education that it revolves exclusively around right and wrong may not be an education that prepares you, at least for some of the challenges that you're going to meet out in the big wide world. So inactive is the first. Embodied is the second. We are first and foremost bodies. And I'll say a little bit more about that a bit later on. But you simply can't dissect, you can't pull apart. Even the most physical of activities have something of the mind about them. Tinkering with something in your shed, an English author called Michael Ondaatje produced a lovely word. He talked about out of tinkering comes thinkering. That tinkering is a powerful form of thinking. It's a powerful adjunct. It's a powerful context within which we think different kinds of things and perhaps more practical or more effective kinds of things than if we're just sitting down in an armchair on our own. Embedded, the third E, means we're always in context. It's drawing us back to the way kids are behaving in your classroom is powerfully influenced by the way you're behaving. And there are a lot of teachers who don't realize that. A lot of teachers who think if anything's going wrong, I'm fine. What's wrong with them? But a classroom is a complex biological system in just the same way that the body is a complex biological system. And you are a major perturbation in that system. And therefore, for example, we may come back to practical implications, but in teacher training, certainly in my country, there isn't much attention paid to the little things that teachers do that either strengthen or undermine the classroom as a safe place to be a learner. All kinds of things that I might be doing unwittingly, which either contribute to creating the classroom as a place where it's okay for me to not know, to have a go, to have to try, to make mistakes, to get things wrong, to be ignorant. That's what learning is, isn't it? Learning is working at and beyond the margins of your current competence and comprehension. So this is not a matter of being sentimental or being progressive or being something like that. This is a matter of anybody who wants to maximize the amount of learning that's going on in their classroom should, if they're awake, be concerned about whether they're allowing little things to happen in the classroom which can undermine the safety. There's a cocky little group of boys in the corner who are very clever and mostly get things right, but when someone else who's not a member of their friendship group offers something that isn't right, and they snigger or make some witty put down, and the teacher lets that go, we've allowed a decrement in the safety of that classroom to occur. It's not rocket science. And as I say, this is not romantic, is it? This is just a matter of being an effective teacher. So we're always in situ. And the fourth is extended. Fourth E is extended, which means we are built to augment our ability to be intelligent by creating, manufacturing, collecting, and refining a vast set of tools that augment, that are intended, from crockery, knives and forks, tape measures, through to smartphones and language itself. So to try and, for example, the issues at schools at the moment about whether to ban smartphones is prejudiced on the fact that it is not worth trying to sit down with a classroom of kids and have an intelligent conversation with them about when and for what purposes it's really useful to have your phone in the classroom and when it absolutely isn't. And see if you can, as a group of 30 intelligent human beings, can work out a modus vivendi, a way of operating, such that everybody understands and signs up to some ground rules. Now, some teachers don't think that kids could do that they could be involved in partnering with us around that difficult issue. But when they're out of school, like us, their phones are such a powerful part of their every way of functioning. There's a friend of mine whose work we've drawn on a lot in the book called Andy Clark. Andy Clark says, when your smartphone breaks or you lose it, there is really no difference in kind between that and having a mini stroke.
Yeah. I can relate.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So how are we dealing with that in schools? Are we dealing with that that's intelligent? Or come exam time, do we take away, or do we say, you can't bring your tools in, that's called cheating, and now show us how bright
So
you are.
artificial. Yeah.
It's so artificial. That's like saying, taking, I can't immediately think of a New Zealand equivalent, but taking David Beckham's boots off him and saying, now show us how good a footballer you are. It's just silly, isn't it?
It's absurd. Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. And it's all of this sort of points to me, this sort of like, there's a real hesitation and a real allergy that our politicians and our policymakers have in terms of their wrestling with complexity across the board, though, isn't it? They don't like these nuanced discussions and relationships, because I am totally with you on the mobile phone front. And we're going through a process at the moment, co-designing a curriculum around artificial intelligence and actually how we teach our young people how to use it, what it is, why not to use it at times, the harm, the risks and all the rest of it. And it's messy and it's complex, but I am committed because it's going to be far more powerful than pretending that you could shove it back in Pandora's box and that it doesn't exist, which is an absolute time waster. And talking about...
Politicians in general don't like complexity. They don't think that the electorate can do complexity.
They're the parent voters.
and right-wing politicians are worse than left-wing politicians. They're worse than there are some extreme left-wing politicians and activists who also have a pretty limited view of what counts as intelligent discourse.
Yeah, because and this takes us to your second post that you wrote about, where you talked about this idea that we need to get away from this idea of people being computers and treating it as a sort of X plus Y, equals, X and X equals Y or whatever. So what kind of intelligence does the embodied view actually describe? And why is this distinction important?
Well, I think part of my mission in writing this book, I'm also planning a separate book, which is about intelligence itself, is to try and rescue the idea of intelligence from its being equated with intellect. It's like intelligence is I think a lot in concrete metaphors. I exemplify the embodiment of thinking because I can't think properly unless I have a concrete metaphor. So it's not computers. I forgot what I was going to say about that. But people trying to get a handle on what this organ of intelligence has always been, as all science has always been, is a matter of kind of trying to get hold of a workable analogy or a workable metaphor and say, well, it's a bit like this. And then that helps you think about it for a while. And then it doesn't. Then it stops helping. It stops helping being thoughtful. We ought to teach analogical thinking in schools. Somebody famous once said, analogies and metaphors are intensely misleading. Unfortunately, they are the least misleading things we have. And they become misleading when we hang on to them for too long. So it's like teaching kids to understand something. You say, well, it's a bit like this. We're doing electricity. It's a bit like water flowing down pipes. It isn't really, but it's a bit like it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you push it a little bit further and you realize it's not exactly like it. It's more complex. The atom is a bit like a pebble. No, it's a bit like a current bun. No, it's a bit like a miniature solar system. No, it's a bit like a smear of electricity, like a kind of cloud or fog or what have you. So people are always reaching for those metaphors. And the computer metaphor, when the digital computer arrived on the scene back in the 1950s and 60s, of course, psychologists latched onto it as the latest metaphor for the mind.
Mm.
It's like the latest technology always becomes the sexiest new metaphor for thinking about these kinds of things. And, for a while, it stimulated a certain good kind of research. Cognitive psychology was born in the 1960s and became very useful. But very quickly, it became attached only to the intellectual side of our being. So cognitive psychology, as opposed to developmental psychology or experiential psychology or social psychology. I did my undergraduate degree back in the late 1960s, and it was a separate kind of thing, and it was a very high, cognitive psychology, high status kind of thing. It's to do with language, memory, decision making, problem solving, and all the problem solving. It wasn't things like how to save your marriage. It was things like, doing IQ tests, artificial, little rational, disembodied, disembedded problems that were kind of, required your intellect only. So for a while, there was quite a lot of excitement about deriving models of mind, which on the basis of it being a bit like a computer. So you have a kind of, computers have a motherboard, they have an Intel chip, they have a random access memory, they have a disk drive or a solid state or whatever. So the mind must be a bit like that. So we produce a little model of the mind where you have a little box called working memory where stuff arrives, and you have another little box called long-term memory where it gets shoveled into. And unfortunately, there's a kind of narrow gangway that leads from the working memory into long-term memory, so you can't get much through that along that little gangway all at once. And that model drove a lot of experimental research. And then it got picked up by some educators around the world and presented as if that were, cut and dried. Science has shown. So then you start thinking about young people in this sort of cold cognition kind of way. You've
And
lost
do you
sight.
think this is part of the reason we have this whole thing about cognitive load and it like being a finite capacity?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a fact that kids quite often find some things to learn difficult.
Yeah.
They don't make the progress that we would like them to make. So what are the possible reasons for that? Well, one possible reason for that is that it's just darn difficult. And if you want, you can dress it up and call it cognitive load. I don't mind if you insist, but it's just way beyond what they can currently connect with.
Yeah.
It's intrinsically hard. But there are all kinds of other reasons why Jo might be struggling with her learning in the classroom. She might be frightened that her parents are about to split up. She might be frightened of being beaten up in the playground at break time. She might be feeling
And that
a bit bolshy and want to do her best to frustrate her teacher. There's all kinds of things that human beings might bring to this understanding over and above or quite different from this idea of cognitive load. So it's one small possibility amongst a much larger and richer view of what may be going on with Jo as to why she's finding it difficult to understand what Avogadro's number is or whatever it might be. Sorry, what were you going to say, Claire?
No. I was just saying, and because I like the point you make in the book around intelligence and well-being, and that idea of that real world intelligent, and I mean, all of this just comes back to us being sort of humans, and humans that are actually very, very much connected in our context and the nature and the environment that we exist
Absolutely,
in. And
absolutely.
we can't. All brains don't learn the same, and we can't make.
That's right. That comes back to our tolerance for complexity, doesn't it? Human beings, human relationships, human motivations are messy and complex. Get used to it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help to try and replace a living, breathing, feeling, sweating, worrying human being with a tiny little box diagram which completely narrows down your discourse about that person. And the more doesn't happen everywhere, but in some places it does. The more that kind of idea of, we're in the business of filling minds with trustworthy knowledge. That whole sort of image, the computer-based image of cold cognition, that it's about facts, it's about correctness, it's about retention, it's about writing, all of that particularly the stuff about correctness, that can create unintentionally but powerfully a rather callous attitude in a school or in a classroom. It's like if it's all about getting through this content as quickly as possible, correctly, in order to get the best exam results as possible. And under pressure, teachers under pressure, it's like, all this stuff about kind of relationship stuff in the classroom, it's all very well, but I'm already 2 weeks behind on photosynthesis and I couldn't possibly, that mindset of having to plow through the stuff, which doesn't give me time. I'd love to be more human and more loving and remember everybody's names and welcome them whenever I come into the classroom and all those kinds of things. But I'm completely knackered and I'm under pressure to raise the test scores in my school. Well, it's not surprising under those circumstances that a number of basic human virtues like kindness and empathy might get squeezed out. And that culture might spread both within the staff room and within the student body. A kind of callousness can grow up. Whereas if we have a more rounded, not sentimental, but more rich and more accurate view of human beings, then that will guard against succumbing to this rather intellectualized pressure, don't you think?
Yeah, listening to you speak, Guy, I'm just kind of staggered how quickly our country's pivoted, because some of the things you were alluding to, we kind of describe differently, but culturally responsive practice and creating really safe classrooms, they were kind of cornerstone conversations we were having kind of 4 or 5 years ago, but they've just completely disappeared. And I think we're just starting to see creep into teacher practice some of the things that you're kind of warding us against, those things that kind of look to create separation from teaching and learning as a kind of product of its environment, and treating it as if it is this kind of cold box of input and outputs. Yes. One thing that we're hearing more of in the last 12 months are kind of direct comparisons to what's happened in the UK. For people that aren't aware, you guys are kind of further down this path. What is the state of teaching and learning in the UK? And are things shifting around?
Yes and no. I mean, we rightly kind of bring us back to the current state of education. The problem is that there are everywhere I've been. I don't travel so much these days, but I used to travel a lot, all over the world, different countries, looking at schools and talking to education. I haven't come across a single country yet that's cracked this. but neither have I come across a single country where there aren't pockets, beacons of brilliant culture creation in schools, which allow kids to do as well as they can on the kind of required testing. And there is a much more broad, humane, rich, imaginative ethos within the school. But it's very patchy. Part of the problem, one of the problems that was at the root of writing this book was the feeling that that we kind of have a pretty good idea of what direction of travel we need in education. Needs to be something that helps people develop a set of skills and dispositions that will enable them to navigate life and to lead lives that are rich, fulfilling, responsible, and productive, broadly speaking. An awful lot of people, include the OECD and all kinds of other people, will sign up to a model like that. And then that tends to get squeezed out. And any talk of kind of any reforms that are thought of as being alternative or progressive get repulsed. One of the strange things is the degree of hostility that is directed against progressive models, inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, hands-on learning, expeditionary learning. There's all kinds of models around the world of richer and broader ways of doing education, but they attract an awful lot of skepticism and often downright hostility. And I think that comes back. One of the reasons for writing the book is the slow and patchy nature of reform or the development of the educational system, the continual downgrading of the manual, the physical, the vocational education, treating that as if it were secondary, the dominance of what I call intellectual selectionism as a model of education. It's basically an obstacle course where the obstacles become more and more intellectually demanding until only 20 or 30% of people come out at age 18 having been able to jump all those particular hurdles. So it's a selective model, and the selection is based on your ability to rise to increasingly complex, abstract, disembodied kinds of intellectual challenge. Our addiction to written testing, for example, and one of the kind of root insights of the book is that all of these concerns that are around very broadly around the world, of which I've not named just a few, that a lot of them can be fueled down, like the taproot of this is this split between mind and body. Is this sense that mind equals intellect, equals intelligence, body equals menial, equals untrustworthy, equals emotional. In traditional thinking, equaled feminine, you might add, was also treated as a kind of a less well developed form of thinking than the abstract, rational patriarchal reasoning. So what's happening if we can shift these underlying assumptions in people's heads that somehow or other the best we can do for kids is select and train them to be intellectuals. If we can push that as far as possible, if we can make that objectionable, if we can make that at least questionable, then that might open up more breathing space. That's part of our hope for this book. Open up more breathing space for other perfectly sensible things like hands-on learning, different lengths of, if you look at the way schools are organized, they're really weird. Why 50 minutes at a time? Why patchwork timetable? Why written exams? Why age batching? Why it's like, we won't really get to a 21st century model of education unless we start digging down and trying to find what is the root of these peculiarities that have become so normal that often we don't even realize how strange they are.
Oh, I'm always blown away. Like as a school leader, having these discussions, and I talk to other school leaders about changing timetables, and they look at you blankly, like it's an impossibility.
Yeah,
This abstract construct has become so foundational and so concrete and so controlling that they can't even fathom that a school could exist without it.
I know these things become perfectly obvious. Things become unthinkable. We did a little experiment with a school a little while ago where we just got the kids and the teachers exploring what difference it made if you were able to move in different kinds of ways and what impact that had on your learning. And the kids came up with all kinds of great insights about whether doing 20 star jumps before you sat down to do your homework, would that kind of, fizz you up and make you more attentive and more aroused, or would it exhaust you or what have you? But the most interesting, not surprising thing was the impact on the teachers, several of whom said in this little school that we were working with, I'd fallen into the trap of thinking that learning was something where you had to sit still. He said, and we almost criminalize. This was his word. I realized that I've tended to fall into the trap of criminalizing movement in the classroom. And he said, and having realized that, now I can get the kids to kind of change their places, to change their posture. When I want to give them some thinking time, I say, just go out into the school grounds and walk around for a bit with your learning buddy and see if that helps you think. It does. Philosophers walk around all the time when they're having conversations. So, there's all kinds of background research behind the idea that movement, different kinds of movement are really important, really conducive to different kinds of thinking. And that's quite interesting territory. Yeah, a lot of teachers forgotten about it. They just don't do it.
Can I ask you a pragmatic question? So I'm a school leader, and we're a senior-only school that's regarded as very progressive, and it's unusual even in New Zealand that we don't have a uniform. And we have a collapse. We don't have a timetable on a Wednesday. They do impact projects out with the community. Really, really exciting, messy, creative learning. One of the things that we constantly battle with, and I know it's the reason why people dismiss what we do, is community perception. And this absolute trap that we have within schools around community perception and the parent body, who are in essence what politicians are dealing with voters, being incredibly nervous about anything other than what they experienced in their day, in their schooling, and trying to demonstrate the value of things that aren't easily measurable and comparable. So there's no, formal assessment or league tables for the learning that they do on a Wednesday, but they do demonstrations and celebrations of learning that are incredible. And I know for a fact that our young people do incredibly well when they move into university and actually do very well in getting scholarships because they can demonstrate a whole lot of competencies and skills that more traditional learning doesn't offer them. How do you break through that? Like, we have to maintain a real level of courage to keep doing what we're doing in the current climate, more and more so, because it's
against the government, but also I think you're saying, Claire, against community preconceptions.
Yeah.
I think we just have to keep, it's like the whole thing about how do you eat an elephant? You just have to one bite at a time. You just have to keep taking every opportunity to offer a counter narrative to that.
So just keep celebrating the stories and the narratives and successes.
Every time you meet a new parent who's thinking of sending their kid to your school, every time you have a parents' evening, every time you have every time you send a message from the school home to the parents, keep nibbling away at these presuppositions. find examples of people in the community who are incredibly wise or happy or successful, but didn't do well under this kind of narrow
Yeah.
way of functioning. Get lots of mums and dads in to talk about what makes their heart sing, what makes their life,
Because
how
when
they
you ask parents what they want,
know.
when they start talking about what they want for the young person, so much
Yes,
of it is about engagement and happiness and a
yes,
sense of belonging,
yeah.
like not
You
Johnny being top of the maths class,
just
it's
keep
actually
tapping,
so much bigger.
just keep tapping into that and
Yeah.
it's like a kind of big, cruise ship. It's like it takes, 50 miles to turn it around.
Mm.
And I think you just need to keep nibbling it away at it. And of course, recommending my book to everybody.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, and that brings us back to the fourth question we had for you tonight, Guy, which is talking about what embodied education actually looks like in practice, and also where you see the alignment with actually what we have been lauded for in the past here, which is our mātauranga Māori, our culturally responsive practice. You refer to sort of indigenous approaches to education. So
Yeah.
what do you give us a quick 101 of what embodied education might look like and where you see the opportunities for us to lean into our background and our strengths here in Aotearoa?
Well, there's a whole spectrum of implications from things that we couldn't do yet, things that are quite deep and quite pervasive, quite structural or quite political, all the way back to, chapter 10, which is the longest chapter in our book, is called 87 Smart Things You Could Do in Your Classroom Tomorrow,
Excellent.
in order to gradually infiltrate a lot of different little things that would create a more welcoming attitude towards the richness of embodied human beings. For example, I mean, and you talk about these kinds of things for a long time. Things like, just involving the kids in deciding what will be the best layout of the furniture for the topic or the problem or the activity that we're doing today. You could do that. Moving the teacher's desk from the front of the classroom to the back of the classroom. What difference might that make? Letting kids go out and walk around whilst they're problem solving. The school that we worked with, that simple thing had a huge effect on the speed and the accuracy with which kids were solving mathematical problems when they were allowed to walk around with it. But
And we
then,
have to remind teachers that they still have control of their space, don't they? Irregardless of any reforms, any curriculum changes, any assessment frameworks, we have an incredible level of agency where we could be doing this.
and the teachers sometimes forget that they have that. They think
Mm.
it's a kind of there's often a sort of this. Not all teachers by any manner means, but kind of a sort of an ambivalent, also I sometimes think slightly adolescent mindset that teachers have, which is kind of on one hand saying, I'm a grown-up professional, don't tell me what to do. And there's another thing which says, oh, please tell me what to do. Because, if someone's telling me what to do, then I can't, if someone is telling me what to do and I'm doing it, then I can't get it wrong.
Mm.
And there's some sort of security in that. I remember someone telling me that there's an old Polish proverb which says, he who sleeps on the floor need not fear falling out of bed. And that sort of sleeping on the floor is like, I'll do what I'm told. I'll adopt a kind of slave mentality so no one can growl me because that's what I'm doing. Whereas if I start playing around with the furniture, or we start as a whole staff discussing whether we might have independent learning Wednesdays, or whether we might move from a 50-minute lesson to a 2-hour lesson as our basic template, or whatever it might be, then you might hopefully you'll get more of an uptake from those kind of things. So there's kind of all these little things like allowing fidgeting or doodling. It's good psychological research that shows for some people, fidgeting and doodling are important positive adjuncts to paying attention. It's not you're not paying attention, it's just they help you. Some people, they help you pay attention. Yet it's back to the thing about, kids should be as still as possible in the classroom, and any form of movement is an instruct, or, even just, I remember when I was at school, one famous occasion, I was looking out of the window and we were doing some writing task. The teacher said, "What are you doing, Claxton?" I said, "I'm thinking, sir." He said, "Well, stop it." I mean, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like the conundrum we're facing, full stop.
So what about bringing more emotion back into the classroom? There's some very nice studies by an Australian researcher, a guy called Joe Forgas, showing that if you deliberately kind of shift the emotional mood of a classroom, you shift the cognitive engagement with the subject matter of what's going on. It's a little bit like, I don't know if you have these in New Zealand, you can buy, when you go to a DIY shop, you can get like white, but with lots of different tinges, lots of different kind of colors. You can have white with a hint of apple, or white with a hint of peach, or white with a hint of this.
Shell.
Sorry?
White with a little bit of shell.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, what about if we were doing the causes of the Second World War with a hint of irritation, or a hint of empathy, or a hint of sadness, or a hint of judicial dispassionateness, or what have you? And what you find is that those different, for example, if you want kids to be more critical, make them slightly cross.
Yeah.
If you want kids to be more creative, make them happy. This is well documented, experimentally derived stuff like that. So wouldn't that be fun to play with?
Yeah.
In the classroom, to use that more, and again use it. I mean, a lot of my work at the moment is persuading teachers to see their kids as co-researchers into all these different aspects of how embodiment might improve or influence their ability to be powerful and effective learners. So, there's all this kind of thing. And then you can go right up to the other end, Claire, where, this is a huge revolution in understanding and thinking. There are chapters in our book about the ways we have to we talked about intelligence and the reframing of intelligence, but you also have to talk about the reframing of the nature of learning itself, reframing of the nature of thinking, reframing of the nature of memory, and so on. These are like cornerstones, are presumptions about those, and knowledge as well. What is knowledge? What is memory? What is thinking? What is learning? What is intelligence? These are our presumptions about those form 5 of the most important foundation stones of any system of education, don't they? The way we think about those things. So what embodiment science doing is causing a kind of seismic shift in how we think about those underlying concepts. If we think about memory as a much more organic, biological, historical sedimentation of experience, then that leads you in a very different kind of direction from if we think about it as a kind of, a larder or a warehouse of facts inside people's heads, and so on with all these other things. So there's a kind of broad range. There's 87 smart things you could do tomorrow. But then in the last chapter of our book, there's more, we go back to the more deep, the more challenging, the more radical shifts, which some teachers, some schools, maybe yours by the sound of it, are already quite a long way down that track. But others are yet to set out on that journey. And what we try and do in the book is present these little things that you could do tomorrow as, this is my fanciful metaphor for this, like they're stepping stones towards these deeper, you can see them as being, I think of it as like stepping stones across a river on a moonlit night. The moon is our changed understanding of where we're going, of what's possible with kids, of what education could and should be. That's the moon. And that we can't get to the moon immediately, but the moon can illuminate the stepping stones so that we can see that these tweaks that we're making, we're experimenting with and consolidating into our everyday practice as classroom teachers are all steps in a direction towards a richer, more powerful preparation of all young people, not some privileged subset, but youngsters. This is like the second game of education. The first game is exam success and competition. We're not going to get rid of that anytime soon. So we have to shift our attention to the second game. What is it that all kids can win at school? Answer, preparation of a powerful set of key competencies or learning dispositions that are broad enough and strong enough to stand them in good stead, whether they're going to become shepherdesses or short order chefs or professors of philosophy or school teachers or stay-at-home mums. Whatever their track in life is going to be, they will look back on their school days and say to themselves with a laugh, I got crap exam scores, but a damn good education.
Okay, Guy,
I love that.
Really sorry. We have to bring this to a close on that particular line. That
is such a good close, though. Such a good close.
In all seriousness, though, we are really grateful for the time that you have given us tonight, this morning, to take us through your book. I think that for a lot of us that stand in critique of the current direction of education here, I don't think we can overstate how important it is to have people like yourself come and speak with clarity around this idea that actually there is alternative conversations and the types of emotions that we feel as teachers when we see the current approach not working for learners within our schools is right and is real. And that the only way we are going to be able to move forward is by having people like yourself very articulately explain these things in ways that kind of make us feel confident to go out and have further conversations.
And give us the confidence to follow our gut. And quite a gut-centric education that you've talked about and view. Like I just think we need to keep being confident that actually we do know what's right for our young people. And everything swirls around us. We've got to come back to being committed to doing what we know is the best for our young people.
And embodiment science can provide a integrative and robust platform for that, foundation for that confidence. So all these different little progressive things that are around, they all come back to putting the body back into the classroom. And we can do that now knowing that we have science on our side.
So once again, Guy, on behalf of Kieran, I thank you so much for the time that you have given us. We'll make sure that we link to your book in the Substack post when we put this out, How Embodiment Science Transforms Education by yourself and Emily Poel.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.